Good morning, everyone. You all feel so far away back there, but I recognize that you might like your space. But if you want to move up and make things more intimate, please feel free. My name is Stacy Brenner. I represent Senate District 30, which includes all of Gorham and most of Scarborough. And I am the current co-chair, although my other co-chair termed out, of the PFAS Advisory Fund. We've been a collected group of folks from industry and from the executive branch together working on how to set this fund up over the last few years. We have created a staff over that time period who you'll hear from today, and we'll give you an update on where the work is. I'd like to start by having my committee colleagues introduce themselves, and we'll start going this way.
I am Jim Buckle, and my wife and I run the Buckle Farm in Unity, Maine, which is a mixed organic vegetable farm, and we have PFAS in our water.
My name is Jenny Tilton Flood. I am one of the owners of Flood Brothers Dairy Farm. I am serving on the committee as a representative of agriculture. And while our farm has not been directly impacted by the contamination of PFAS, we have been indirectly affected, as has everyone who lives here on this earth. And so we have a vested interest in making sure that this fund is carried out well and equitably.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Beal. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, and I also sit on this committee.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Miller. I'm the Director for the Bureau of Remediation and Waste Management at Maine DEP, and I am sitting here on behalf of Commissioner Loisem, who is unable to make it today, and she is a member of this committee.
Thank you. And then we have two folks online. Is that going to work? Do we know? Do we have a... Okay. Online, we have Lucia Brown, who is our committee member who represents Farm Service Agency, which is a branch of the USDA, and Dean Diane Rowland from the University of Maine School of Agriculture. So our agenda this morning is that there will be an update about the response from Megan Hennessy, and then a fund update from Beth Valentine, who's the director of the fund. And then we will open the floor up for public comment, and we welcome you all to share your thoughts, your suggestions, your feedback about what has happened to date. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Megan. Welcome.
Could you switch back to the slide deck? And while he's doing that, I'll just say thank you, Senator, for the introduction. My name is Megan Hennessy. I am the director of the PFAS Response Program here at Maine DACF. Technology is wonderful when it works for us. Okay, maybe while they're working on that, I will go ahead and let you all know that this morning I want to go over who the response program is, what we have been doing, how we approach working with producers, some of the technical and financial resources available to folks working with us. I'm afraid to say anything, cause feedback. And one of the items that I wanted to do, there's a slide a little later that shows you the names of our wonderful team. So I think while we're getting this slide deck up, I'm going to pass the microphone to them and just ask them to say their names and their titles, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what they do later. But it's always nice to connect faces with names.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Eckerd. I'm an agricultural PFAS specialist, field staff with DACF.
Hi, folks. I'm Felicia Witten, and I'm also an agricultural PFAS specialist.
Hi, I'm Hannah Legacy. I am the GIS and Technology Coordinator for the response team.
Hello, I am Mary Yerlina. I am also an agricultural PFAS specialist.
Hi, I'm Duncan Failer. I'm the senior planner for the PFAS program.
Hi, I'm Rick Kurzbergen, and I am a contractor to DACF working on dairy issues.
Rick. Okay, good job, team. We got the slide deck up. So jumping in, a little bit of foundation setting. So PFAS in agriculture, why do we find it in agriculture and why do we care? This is just a diagram that shows there's multiple sources of PFAS. It may be industry, it may be consumer products. It eventually reaches our landfills. Landfills might leach. Multiple forms of how it gets into our environment, but one that we focus on is the spreading of biosolids onto agricultural fields. Practice encouraged, used throughout the country. Unfortunately, some of those biosolids contain PFAS contaminants. If it's on the field, it will potentially get into the plants and the animals, and then we all consume them. This is a picture of my own kiddo. We all care about the people that we love and want to protect them. So a brief review of kind of the timeline of Maine's response to PFAS contamination, how we all got here today. So in 2016, there was a drinking water system that was conducting some monitoring of their sources, and they unfortunately did find PFAS contamination in a monitoring well. That monitoring well happened to be located on the field, in a field of a dairy. That dairy, to their credit, asked, what does this mean to our animals and our product? Is it safe? And that started a lot of conversations. We, in consultation with the toxicologist from the Maine CDC team, created an action level of 210 parts per trillion in milk. 2019, Governor Mills created a task force to provide recommendations. They recommended that we as a state systematically investigate where do we find PFAS contamination in the environment and what does that mean for our drinking water and our food in particular. In 2020, the department conducted some retail milk testing where we, again, unfortunately identified a second and then a third impacted dairy farm. One of those farms also had animals they were shipping for beef, so that prompted this creation of a beef PFOS action level of 3.4 parts per billion. 2021, the legislature thankfully approved a budget for a multi-agency response, including many of our positions that you just heard from, and likewise at the Maine DEP. They are charged with investigating both land and water for PFAS. The first Do Not Eat advisory was issued by Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife in Fairfield, specifically for deer. 2022, myself, much of the team, Director Beth Valentine for the fund, all came on board at ACF and started creating some of the programs you'll hear about. The state also banned the land application of sludge. Turn off the tap, if you will. Tier 1 was conducted, Tier 1 investigations were conducted by the Maine DEP That was approximately 60 sites, and that resulted in about in 48 farms being what we would call impacted, and I'll speak to what that really means momentarily. 2023, the PFAS fund plan was finalized. How should we spend the $60 million? The Tier 2 investigations were conducted, about 46 sites, and that resulted in an increase to a total number of 60 impacted farms. 2024, I really want to emphasize that the prioritization work that the Maine DEP did does seem to be accurate. We have seen through the farms that we are working with that there's lower levels of contamination being identified as we go. So the number of impacted farms at the end of this year did reach 111, which is a large number, but I'm going to speak about what that really means. And it's really important to understand that a lot of the farms we've identified, particularly this year, have had lower levels of contamination, and they've got more pathways forward to remain viable and safely operating than some of those particularly Tier 1 locations that we found in the earliest days. There was an additional do not eat advisory for deer and turkey, including areas in Unity, again by our IFNW colleagues. And in 2025, all license application sites are supposed to be done according to statute, and DEP colleagues will be speaking in the legislative season about how to approach that. Again, I really want to emphasize that our experience with our enhanced knowledge about PFAS through this work is allowing us to provide better recommendations to producers and earlier in the process. So those first few farms, there were not a lot of answers when they were discovered, and that was really challenging. We now have a lot clearer pathway forward for new farms that we recognize today versus those first farms. So I mentioned tiers. Some of you may not be familiar with that. Maine DEP categorized based on their anticipated risk, based on the historic licenses, the amount of sludge that was licensed to be applied, and or if there were industrial sources. Those went into Tier 1, coming all the way down to our Tier 4 locations where a permit was issued, but it's not confirmed whether spreading actually took place. So that will be an interesting group, in my opinion, to work through. I also really want to emphasize this graph. Thank you, DEP, for putting it together. You can see all the way on the left that those Tier 1 sites, that's the average PFAS concentration that was tested or found in those sites. Compare that as we go down Tier 2 and then Tier 3, and we do have a couple sites in Tier 4 that have been tested. That's a really significant drop, especially from Tier 1 to Tier 2, but also to Tier 3. That's really important as we look at what will this look like in the next couple of years as we finish up these Tier 3 and Tier 4 investigations. Okay, so when I say impacted farms, what do I mean by that? Every farm is different and unique, and it makes it really hard to categorize everything into one neat bucket and communicate that succinctly. We have decided to utilize our most conservative screening level for soil, which is currently 6.4 ppb for PFOS and 20 parts per trillion for sum of 6 for drinking water. If a farm, that soil level is specific to the scenario of a grass-based dairy operation. Grass is more sensitive to grain in uptake of PFAS. So a grass-based dairy is the most sensitive farming operation to contamination. So we say that there's 111 impacted farms. That means that we need to ask more questions. We may need to be more mindful of what we plant on what field, but it does not mean that those farms are not able to find a viable path forward. Certainly not all 111 of them. You can see here I also included a couple of examples. A field might already be utilized for appropriate crops, so corn is a great option for a lot of impacted fields. It does not uptake nearly as much as grass does. And somewhat similarly, the drinking water standard is for humans to ingest that water directly. That's where that risk scenario comes from, versus a water source where it may go to an animal or irrigate plants, and there's a transfer factor there, and then it comes to us as humans, and we're not drinking the same amount as if we were, filling up our cup at that tap every time. So it's really nuanced and gets into the weeds, but it's really important that we, accurately convey what that means. Out of those over 100 sites that we are considering impacted, over half of them are considered not of current concern, meaning that our team has looked at their operation, the details of it, and we don't feel a need to routinely monitor their product. What they're growing is safe. What they're producing is safe. We will check in now and then, make sure that their operations haven't changed drastically, but we're not concerned about what they are doing. So a screening level versus an action level. Screening levels, I just talked a lot about them, but they basically mean we need to ask more questions and be thoughtful. What are you growing? What are you using it for? Are there other exposure routes that the animals might be getting, or your crops, whatever it may be? We may do further testing. We may want to verify where our product is at. But it's a spark for more conversation. Compare that to an action level, which milk and beef are on the books. They are where if we see a test come back above that, based on the toxicity values and the consumption rates that we understand for those products in that compound, we say that that's unsafe and it cannot be sold commercially until we can successfully modify the farm's practices, bring those levels down. I do want to just mention, I think particularly important in the agricultural setting, the map, the DP PFAS investigation map's current term, is a really excellent resource. It does have those historically licensed sites where the records have been located and digitized. It may not be a complete resource. These records are very old and it's time consuming to go through and find them and then digitize them. It also does not include a lot of samples that our team might have taken. We recognize that producers have a really uphill challenge in communicating to their customers and having customers understand exactly what the results mean and that their product is safe if it's on the market. They're working with ACF and their product's on the is on the shelf, then that means that ACF, in consultation with our main CDC toxicologists who are health experts, feel that that product is safe. Sorry, one more point. A mark on this map does not guarantee that sludge was ever spread. It's a license record. It also doesn't mean that that sludge had high levels of PFAS if it was spread. So that's why we need to go out and do testing to understand what's actually out there in the environment. I've mentioned a few agencies, but I just really want to credit all of us for recognizing that this is a really complicated subject. It requires interdisciplinary approach, and the state, I think, has done an excellent job of connecting with each other, utilizing our full skill set, and best serving the people of the state. How am I doing on time? I don't have a time marker in front of me. Thank you. So I introduced everyone. the only one who is not here, Dr. Kasha Samanska. She's an assistant state veterinarian who assists our team. She's been a great resource. And I just want to highlight that our team's goal is to protect consumers by identifying PFAS contamination, pursuing strategies to reduce or eliminate PFAS from the food supply, and providing technical and financial assistance to retain farm viability. So a lot of aspects to what we do. How do we work with producers? First, we gather a lot of information. What are they growing? How? All of those things I've already kind of mentioned. We create a sampling plan. We collect the samples, send them to the lab. We pay for those tests. That's actually, even that is a huge improvement from those early farms to where we are today. A lot of labs are expanding their capabilities for testing, so wait times are improving. It still can be a lot slower than we'd like to see, but it's going in the right direction. It can be as low as as quick as a 10-day turnaround time, particularly for our milk samples right now, which is a great improvement on 28 days plus or minus that it used to be. We assess the results, validate them interagency, and then provide mitigation recommendations to the producer specific for their scenario about what do those tests mean, what should they actually do for actions based on that result. There's also financial assistance we'll speak about, and we recognize that this is enormously challenging for producers who are told that they have this contamination on their farm and that they've likely been consuming water and or products on this farm for potentially decades. And we try to be aware of that in all of these steps. We also repeat it as necessary. So sometimes you take a sample and it means that you need to go out and take another sample to really understand the full picture. A couple quick examples. When we say we provide mitigation recommendations, what does that really mean? Again, every farm is different. Not all answers, not all suggestions will work for every producer. But some common themes have kind of emerged in the last few years. So identifying and labeling feed sources is always useful. This photo is a producer noticed the orange and the black tape versus the orange tape. I think he may have bought out his local hardware store in different colors of tape, but it's incredibly useful. If you provide the cleanest feed to animals in the months prior to processing, that might allow you to utilize fields which may have some amount of contamination, but allow that animal to depurate because the animal will process the contamination, excrete it over time, and then when they go to processing, they're low enough that they don't pose a risk to humans consuming them. We also commonly recommend plants with lower uptake, particularly on those potentially a little bit higher fields, or even ornamental crops. So one of our producers, they historically have utilized spinach for their early season cash flow. Unfortunately, the spinach was not something that they were comfortable or seemed like was a good fit for those soil levels. But they also had a flower business, and we were able to support them getting a few more bulbs to really increase their flower production, get that early cash flow, and then enable them to utilize that to plant out the crops in the field for the rest of the year. So this is a particular farm that we've worked with over a number of years. The graph starts in late 2020, and this particular graph ends in late 2022. So you can see that it takes a long time. This farm started at 800 parts per trillion for their milk. Remember, 210 is our current action level. So they started very high. They had a long way to come down. They were successful in getting all the way down to non-detect. We also learned a few things along the way. I'll show you in a moment where this first spike was a bunker with heavily contaminated haylage. in a back corner. So we now recommend packing flat as much as you can to try to avoid that spike. And we also saw where there were some fresh heifers added to the herd, and that caused that second spike that you see in the later part of the graph. They had some contaminated feed, and they came in higher than the rest of the herd. Now we understand that, and we can communicate to producers and advise them different ways that they might be able to manage that feed. This is that example of the mitigation in action with the hot corner versus trying to lay it out flat. We also do have some other recommendations available on our website that I want to just highlight for anyone who might be curious or want to see some more. From my program specifically, we have fortunately been able to provide $3.2 million in direct support to farms. And we've spent over 30,000 staff hours and collected over 3,000 samples for PFAS analysis. So really building some understanding of both where it is in the environment and how it might move through different media. So let's talk about the financial assistance. I've mentioned a couple of examples, but give you a few more details, and I want to highlight that our financial assistance programs are focused on assisting producers who could not have known about the PFAS contamination when they purchased the property or when they began to farm. So, of course, we work for the state. Funding is not unlimited. We want to make sure that we first and foremost assist the producers who own this property prior to the state and all of us collectively understanding that these chemicals pose a risk. So my team can provide clean feed assistance. It's a short-term assistance option to get those animals depredating, try to get us back into production, while a producer might look for a new field to lease or turning those crops over to something more appropriate. In some instances, we can pay for debt service on existing loans. We also provide equipment and input costs, and then my team handles infrastructure that's less than $150,000. A couple of examples, these are some equipment that was utilized to grow some both corn and other grains, and then this is a high tunnel that enabled a producer who had a filtration system installed that they're a crop producer, utilize very high levels of water, especially in the summer, and had some flow issues. So the tunnel helped spread out the water usage through the year and try to bring them back into balance for their income potential over the course of the entire calendar year. We do have a program that enables us to reimburse for testing that producers may do on their own. I will highlight that if a producer is willing to work with ACF, we would always prefer to work with them directly. Make sure that those samples follow all protocols, and also we have some methodologies that we've found more reproducible and more actionable for producers. So if we can, we'd love to work with you directly to take those samples, but we recognize that that may not be a path that producers always want to utilize. In rare situations, particularly for the health of the animals, deprecation may not be feasible, and in which case we can provide indemnification value and water treatment if the water source is affecting that product negatively. If it's potable, we can filter it. So a few more lessons learned. As I said, our field-based experiences, there's also a developing body of peer-based and reviewed studies, which is excellent. When I first started in the program about 2.5 years ago, there was a lot of times a question would come up, would say, what do we know about this? And the answer was, well, there's one study that indicates that maybe. And that was really hard for both the producers who are looking for that guidance and for our team trying to make recommendations. We've come an enormous way ourselves in 2.5 years, and the academic community is also recognizing this as an area of research, which will always just allow us to provide better and better recommendations. Like I mentioned, we've developed some strategies that have become somewhat of a go-to in a lot of situations, and then we continue to develop new options and think critically as new scenarios come to us. That interdisciplinary approach is really critical. I showed the agencies that are all involved here, and we truly would not be coming up with as many solid recommendations and serving the citizens if we weren't working together. Again, I said this again, but it's very much worth repeating. In a lot of situations, farming can continue safely, particularly with that comprehensive support that we fortunately are able to provide from ACF. The technical understanding, financial resources, mental health awareness, providing long-term and individualized support. Long-term, both because it can take a long time to address the initial scenario, but also as producers may pivot or try to adopt new methodologies that might raise more questions that we also need to support them through. So it's important that we are here and we are committed to supporting producers for that long term. Communication is definitely challenging. This is a really complex topic. We can get into the science and the weeds very quickly, and it's really nuanced, and it's hard to communicate that, particularly to the public, but also the broader agricultural community and to the consumers, and ensuring that they understand the work that we're doing and that we are committed to protecting the food supply and also having our farms continue operating. The science is evolving as well, and anytime you have new and emerging science, that also raises a complexity in your communication. As I said, lab methodologies are improving. Different matrices, so milk or manure, different matrices, different types of things you might be testing. The labs are gaining more confidence in having reproducible results no matter which laboratory you're using, and also particularly and importantly, lowering the detection limits so we can see, if you will, lower and lower levels in a product and have more sensitivity. Not all PFAS are the same. What compound is present and what product is being produced is really critical. So PFOS will move through different crops in the environment differently than PFBA will. So we spend a lot of time talking about specific compounds in the specific setting of that producer. Contamination varies not only between fields, but also within fields. So a farm, two fields next to each other are probably going to have different contamination levels, but we've also recognized that within the fields, there may be variation within that as well, and that sampling methodology becomes really important to ensure that we've got reproducible results for the average concentration of that field. I'm also just really excited. Our Maine CDC colleagues in particular have done a lot of hard work to develop a model for beef levels, and we're still validating that, but I'm really hopeful that that will provide a really excellent tool for producers in the near future. I feel like I'm running long. When do you want me? Okay. So I briefly talked about the lab methodology, the variability between fields. This is a slide that demonstrates the 10 core random core methodology that has been utilized in the past, and we did have different field averages. That doesn't happen in all cases. It's a rare instance, but it's important. We worked with our main DEP colleagues as well as CDC to develop kind of a pilot study, if you will, and look at why that could be happening. These are some aerials of some spreading, and you can see where the darker zones received a lot more concentration than the lighter zones as the equipment moved through that field. So you can imagine that if that was spreading biosolids, and if those biosolids had PFAS contamination in them, then you will end up with higher or lower zones within that field. This is an output from that pilot study I spoke about. This was the one exception where we saw a difference between 15 grid and 30 grid incremental sampling methodology, for those who might be familiar with that. And these heat maps explain and I think highlight the importance of that methodology. You can see where one method happened to hit a few hotter spots on the left, and we had a higher average concentration for the field, where on the right we didn't hit that particularly high area, and we came up with a slightly lower concentration field average. Now the topography at this site wouldn't lead you to believe that that was a hot spot. There's nothing kind of looking at the field that could tell you that that would be an expected outcome. So that was highlighted for our team the importance of doing these 30 grid incremental soil methodology, particularly for the agricultural setting, to provide those best recommendations. So what was new for the response program in 2024? We adopted that ISM based on our work with DEP and CDC. Also, because of that adoption of the different methodology, we really focused on coordinating even earlier in the process of working with a site with DEP and making sure that our ACF staff were the ones going out and doing soil sampling if the land was being used for commercial agriculture, so that we had that ISM method and that we're giving recommendations to producers with that ag lens right from the outset. Again, those tier 3 sites we looked at this summer, they had lower levels of overall contamination. So credit to our DEP colleagues on their risk assessment work. So the numbers have increased, but the levels for these 2024 farms were much lower. That provides more options for those farms. We did work on implementing a process for solar developers who are interested in using PFAS impacted land. They apply to the Public Utilities Commission, and there's a rating criteria. Our program would make a determination about whether the land remains suitable for agricultural production. We were able to provide some limited funding for investigations at homesteads. So if a home farm particularly contacted Maine CDC with concerns, if testing might inform what we might decide to do at a commercial agricultural spot, then we were able to provide some testing which benefited our program and also served those homestead communities that might otherwise have a challenge receiving information about what they might be consuming. And very excited that a new laboratory enabled us to provide 10-day standard turnaround for milk testing, and we are hopeful that we will be able to use them for other matrices in the future. Now, what's ahead for the program? We've learned a lot. I give you a little flavor of that. One of our tasks is going to be trying to summarize what we know and get it into some written documents that others can reference. We are, with many years now of precedent for what we do and how we do it. We are seeking codification for the program in the main statute. We continue to work with our DEP colleagues through the tier investigations. We're coordinating directly with researchers. Like I mentioned, more and more of them are interested in working on this problem. So we can give them some guidance, what we've been seeing, and identify needs that we see here for Maine farmers, maybe help guide their research where is most critical right now. Like I mentioned, new products do come up, so we happen to have some more work on eggs this year, and we are still trying to understand exactly why we see some things at some times. So we continue to have our critical thinking caps on, and always seeking to support our producers as they continue adapting in new ways. Thank you everyone for your attention. I turn it back to Beth, or okay.
Thanks, Megan. Good morning. My name is Beth Valentine. I am the director of the PFAS Fund. I want to introduce and acknowledge a few other people. Together, well, Maddie Bruno, could you stand up? Maddie is responsible for the research elements of the PFAS Fund and assists with the health program, and Melissa Hamlin is responsible for the land acquisition and stewardship element of the program and also assists with the financial assistance. I want to acknowledge Nancy McBrady, Deputy Commissioner, who truly has been a leader in developing all of the department's PFAS response program, as well as been integral to the state's overall PFAS response. Online, I know we have with us Deputy Director Nancy Beardsley from DHHS. She is another member of the advisory committee, and I apologize to any other advisory committee members who may be online. Here at the front of the room, we can't see you. But my gratitude to all the members of the advisory committee for the work that they've put in. Will you please start the second presentation? Okay, thank you. So, I've already introduced the staff. Together, we will be providing some background on the PFAS Fund, and then the 4 elements of the program, the financial assistance, land, research, and health elements, and then looking ahead to 2025. So the fund was established by statute that came into effect in July of 2022. It allocated $60 million to the fund to assist farmers impacted by PFAS contamination. The statute also established this advisory committee. That advisory committee in turn established subcommittees on each of the 4 focus areas. The subcommittees were comprised of subject area experts as well as impacted producers, with the intention of creating a program that is very farmer-centered and addresses the needs of impacted producers. So the advisory committee met for the first time in November of 2022, and through that following spring, worked very diligently to come up with strategies in each of these 4 program areas to support farmers. The public had an opportunity to contribute to the development of this plan through a meeting much like this held 2 years ago here at the Agricultural Trade Show, and a second public hearing held in June of 2023. In July of 2023, the plan developed through this public process was adopted, and then we shifted into the rulemaking phase. The rulemaking was necessary to translate those strategies into the procedures to identify who is eligible, who makes decisions, if there's an appeal, what is the process, et cetera. So that process brought us through till March of 2024. The rules implementing the PFAS Fund became effective on March 17th. And since then, we've been in the implementation phase. And throughout this process, we have continued to evaluate and refine what are we getting right, what could we be doing better, and we'll continue to do that going forward. So Under the umbrella of financial and technical assistance, we developed tools and resources to make it easier for people to access financial assistance and other resources. The first of these is the master application. This is an application that impacted producers can use to access 8 different categories of financial assistance, and I'll speak about those in just a moment. But the master application itself is used for programs funded either by the PFAS Fund or the PFAS Response Program. It's a single application. It's available in hard copy and online as a fillable PDF document. People from the outside don't need to remember which program funds which particular type of financial assistance. The intention is to make it easy for folks to use, fill out the application, return it to DACF. We'll figure out internally who's going to process that application. The second tool we have is the PFAS Response Kit. I have a hard copy up here at the front table. It's also available online. This is a resource guide. So it provides information about the PFAS Response Program, how the state investigates and responds to PFAS contamination, but it also has information from both public and private organizations of additional resources that are available to support impacted producers. Again, it's available online. There are hard copies that we have mailed to all of the producers that are working with DACF. We also have established a navigator program in cooperation with University of Maine Cooperative Extension. Throughout the room you see these blue packets. Those are silicone snack bags. There's also a business card in there so you can get in touch with the navigators. The navigators are people who are very familiar with the resources in that resource guide, and they can provide hands-on assistance, first off, identifying what resources are available to a farmer in a given situation, and then helping to make that connection, whether it's through a phone call, sitting down, helping to fill out an application. So I encourage folks that find themselves in a position where there's PFAS on their property, they're trying to figure out where do they go next. The PFAS response team is fabulous in doing the testing and making those management recommendations, but then the next step, like how do you connect with the business planner to help determine whether something that's technically feasible is in fact economically viable for your operation. So that's where the navigator can help make that connection. So the PFAS Fund is currently accepting applications for administrative cost grants, income replacement payments, professional and technical services, infrastructure projects above $150,000, and loan assistance. And as Megan mentioned, the PFAS Response Program has their suite of financial assistance as well. I will just be speaking about the funds programs. So the administrative cost grant, this is a one-time grant of $3,522 to partially compensate commercial farms for time spent responding to PFAS. So this includes time spent with DACF staff, time communicating with customers to inform them of your findings, time spent strategizing what are your next steps. It is a super easy application. Essentially, describe your situation and sign your name. I encourage every impacted producer to apply for an administrative cost grant. Income replacement is for farms that have had to either reduce or stop sales because of PFAS contamination. We can provide for up to 24 months of lost income. The 24 months do not have to be consecutive. So for a farm that, upon the initial discovery of PFAS, stopped or curtailed sales, that would be one period of impact. We look at, based on filed tax returns, what was the income prior to the discovery of PFAS, and then what is the level of income after PFAS, and that difference is the amount that we can compensate the farm for, adjusted for inflation. So in my example, the farm, they had an initial period of impact. they were eligible and received an income replacement payment, say for 12 months. But then something changes. Maybe tainted feed was brought onto the property. For some reason, they curtail sales for a second period of time. That farm is eligible again for up to an additional 12 months of lost income. Technical assistance. I was just speaking about the navigator connecting an impacted farm with the business planner. Well, those sorts of professional services, again, are something that the PFAS Fund can assist with. So whether it's business planning, marketing, accounting, engineering, legal, we can help make those connections, and we can also help support, pay the fees associated with that type of professional assistance to help guide the transition from what had been past practice to a new operation, a pivot that has been necessitated because of the presence of PFAS. Infrastructure. Infrastructure are permanent structures, so unlike a tractor, which is considered equipment, something that is a permanent structure on the land. It could be a storage silo or a packing room, something, again, necessitated because the business needed to make a change because of PFAS. We can help with that infrastructure. If the cost is below $150,000, it stays with the PFAS response program. Anything above that is PFAS fund. Again, it's just one application. Don't worry about who's going to process it. Just submit it to DACF. New loan assistance. Again, when a farm is in the position of needing to acquire a new loan because of circumstances resulting from PFAS, the PFAS fund can help obtain that loan. So lenders may be reluctant to lend because of the presence of PFAS. So to help alleviate that, the state can assume the costs of, not the cost of the actual loan, but the fees associated with getting a farm service agency guaranteed farm loan for assistance. Or if a lender is asking for an environmental site assessment before they'll approve a loan, that's the fee that we could assume the cost of. So since March of 2024 to the present, we've spent just over $2.25 million in direct financial assistance. The vast majority of that has been income replacement payments, but also administrative cost grants, business planning, and other professional services. At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to Melissa to speak about real estate.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Melissa Hamlin. I help with the financial assistance portions of the program that Beth was just describing, and I'm also responsible for land acquisition and management under the PFAS Fund. You know, the good news is that most impacted farms can adjust their operations and stay with the land, but sometimes it makes sense to walk away. And in those situations, the fund has the ability to purchase impacted properties from commercial farms at fair market value as if there's no contamination. With a couple of minor exceptions, the fund takes care of all due diligence costs and the cost of closing. Farmers can choose whether they would like to sell their entire parcel or just a portion of it. But this is the best option for those farmers that would like to leave their contaminated land behind and move away. Unlike most real estate purchasers, DACF can extend a closing timeline to accommodate a relocation timeline for a farmer or a farm. Typical with most real estate transactions is that the landowner does need to deliver clear and clean title, so the landowner is responsible for taking care of all liens or past property taxes that may exist for the property. All right, I think that's everything there. Yeah. All right, what is the process to sell to DACF? It begins when a landowner submits an inquiry form with documentation about the property's characteristics, the deed, and other documentation. The fund reviews a property for eligibility. A property and farm is eligible to sell to the fund if it's a commercial farm with existing unsafe PFAS contamination, as has been described with the screening levels. The commercial farm must have owned the property prior to the discovery of PFAS, and the farm must be willing to be cooperative with DHCF in order to confirm the characteristics of the contamination. Once we confirm eligibility, we go to our land advisory panel. We have a land acquisition and management advisory panel who also confirms eligibility and applies a score to any property that's under review. The score is relevant if and when the resources of the program exceed the capacity to administer it. The score is based in prioritization criteria that are listed in the rule. Once the advisory panel confirms that a property can move forward in the process, we advise the landowner that we're moving forward, and we will go get an appraisal for the property. The appraisal, again, is as if the property is not contaminated. If the landowner agrees with the price, we can go under contract and enter the due diligence process. The due diligence process investigates it involves an environmental site assessment, title work, potential boundary survey, or other investigations that may be appropriate. The due diligence process can affect the final price. Once the due diligence process is complete, findings are satisfactory and/or the price has been adjusted as appropriate, we can proceed to closing. And all payments are settled and the deed transfers. Once DACF has title to the property, we engage DEP through their voluntary response action program to assess the levels of contamination on the property to decide whether some deed restrictions need to be implemented for the property. Now, DACF's goal is to return agricultural land to agricultural production wherever possible. Future uses for any parcel will be very site-specific. Just like every farm is different, every parcel is different, its location, its characteristics. DACF may consider for future use whether a parcel would be a good fit for a research proposal that is on the table, may evaluate the property to figure out if somehow agricultural production can continue with a different producer in some sort of other way, or it may be an excellent fit for a certain parcel within the local or regional context to be some sort of open space or recreational parcel. But yes, at bottom, DACF seeks to return all of these properties to agricultural production wherever possible, wherever it makes sense. So if anybody would like to talk to me about any of these aspects, my card is at our table near the door. And next, Maddie Bruno will be telling us about research.
Hello, I am Maddie Bruno. I am with the PFAS Fund as well, and I take care of the research side of things. So the PFAS Fund, part of our overall goals is to support research that helps farmers determine their best options for maintaining and enhancing viability despite the presence of PFAS on their farm. So that's a lot of what Megan was talking about. You know, we have these farms, there's a lot of questions about what can be done with them. You know, we are finding out a lot about, through the response program, about what can be done, but there's also a large research aspect that is very important. So part of our work is to support this research, especially research that fits our priorities at DACF. We have two types of grants. We have what we're calling major grants. These are projects that are $100,000 to $500,000, so these are pretty big projects. There are targeted grants, which we have not opened up yet. These are projects that are a little bit more focused, up to $100,000. That can sometimes be like if we have a very specific question. So yeah, as we open up these applications, the scientists and researchers who are applying, their projects have to align with the ACF's research priorities. The research priorities were established both from public comment through the rulemaking process, as well as just through observations from DACF, as well as our research advisory panel. And I think an important and very, I think, cool part of this is that, we have a point system for rating these, and things that are happening on farm and in Maine are going to have more points. And I think that's really important because, we are open to funding research that is helpful for everyone, but it's especially great when it's helpful for Maine farms and especially our impacted producers that we already work with. So, go to the next one. So our exciting news is, we opened up our first major grant award, and we're going to be announcing that in spring 2025. So our applications are coming in on the 31st of January. We're going to go through a peer review process for those. The priorities for this first round were pretty broad. We are looking at PFAS in agricultural settings, so we're kind of looking at the water, soil, plant side of things.
Israel says that Hamas will come back.
So that could be an uptake question, like if crops at certain times maybe are taking up more or less PFAS. We also have animal and animal product studies, so this is like a dairy cow question or a sheep question. Chickens and eggs are a big question we have right now. The next overarching theme is this understanding and the management of PFAS in an agricultural setting. So that's kind of your, can we go no-till, or is tilling better? Or are there changes that we can make in timing that might change uptake? So that's our other one. And then the last one is the remediation question. So for these farms that are PFAS contaminated, what are the suitable uses outside of what we already know? And that includes everything from, what Melissa's talking about. So when is too much PFAS, but also what about things that are grown on this land? What can we do with them? Are there alternative uses for potentially impacted products? Go to the next one. We also have these targeted grants. Still some questions about them, but we are developing that program right now, both internally and with our research advisory panel. So stay tuned for more on that. And then the other role of this research arm is facilitation. There are a lot more people doing PFAS research throughout both Maine and the United States than there were even a year ago. So part of what we do is we get a lot of inquiries from researchers who are looking to be connected with impacted producers. So one service we do offer is for impacted producers who opt in. We're happy to share research proposals with them, and they go through a vetting process. We also talk about a lot with both UMaine, but also nationally, communication just about what research is happening, as well as communicating research results. I think, duplicative research is very important, but also making sure that we're, using resources efficiently and communicating those results to each other. And then the other big thing we're working on is cataloging all of these research results. I have worked in PFAS for 7 years, and I think Megan really nailed it when she said 2 years ago even, there was one study, maybe, if you were lucky. Now we're seeing 15 to 20 studies come out, sometimes daily, about PFAS, and that's a lot of information. Some of it's really applicable to us, some of it isn't. So part of what we're doing is, keeping track of that, and also once we do have all of our DACF-sponsored research, making sure that we can communicate that to a wider audience as well as to our impacted producers. I think that's it for me. Yeah. And back to Beth. Yes.
Thank you, Melissa and Maddie. So the final component of the PFAS fund is related to health, both physical and mental health. In the realm of physical health, we are working to establish a blood testing program for people whose water or soil tests above certain thresholds, so 20 parts per trillion for water or above the residential reg remedial action guideline for soil. So if their soil or water tests above that threshold and the source of the PFAS can be linked back to the land application of biosolids, then folks are eligible for blood testing. So this applies to farmers, farm workers, and significantly non-farm residents. We are working with DEP and DEACF to identify potentially eligible addresses based on all the sampling that the state has been undertaking to date. I anticipate sending a mailing out to those addresses this spring, inviting people to respond to me with the names of the people who live or work at that address so that we can identify who is eligible for this blood testing and also for the mental health services. Simultaneously, I've been speaking with labs and healthcare systems to design a system that is as streamlined as possible. The intention is that people will go to their primary care provider, discuss whether a test makes sense for them. The primary care provider will order the test. Blood will be drawn, analyzed, results will go back to the primary care provider. No blood test results, no healthcare information is coming back to the department, and there will be no out-of-cost expenses for eligible individuals. In addition to the work that we're doing at DACF, we're supporting Maine CDC to undertake a lot of work. First, they are making blood test results a notifiable condition. So this is like childhood lead testing is presently reportable to CDC. And that allows toxicologists to follow up with, in the case of pediatric lead, children who have elevated levels of lead in their systems to help identify the source and what can be done to mitigate against that exposure. So the same thing will be happening with PFAS exposure. Individuals with elevated levels will be contacted by a toxicologist from Maine CDC who can provide guidance to that individual and to that individual's physician. Maine CDC is also developing educational resources both for clinicians and the public to answer questions such as when is it appropriate to order a test, how to interpret results, and how to use those results to inform future healthcare decisions. Maine CDC is also conducting a farmer and farm worker soil exposure study. So to date, they've been working on a modeling exercise to develop soil screening levels for soil exposure from incidental ingestion, dust inhalation, and skin contact. Their goal is to have a research study design completed by this spring and to begin field work this summer. So this study will provide information to help understand at what soil level what soil levels are concerning for worker health. And once we know that, CDC will be able to propose mitigation measures. And then finally, CDC is exploring treatment options to reduce PFAS levels in people. So at the time that we developed the PFAS Fund implementation plan, there were no treatment options to help a person reduce their body burden level. So we included a strategy to explore a clinical trial of methods to reduce PFAS body burden. Since that time, though, a paper on a clinical trial has been published showing that the cholesterol-lowering drug cholestyramine showed decreases of certain PFAS in blood serum. And also, 2 health centers in Maine have approved clinical protocols for administering cholestyramine to highly exposed individuals who are interested in reducing their blood serum levels. So given these recent advances, the Fund and the Advisory Committee will be considering how best to support these highly exposed individuals. Next, please. So this is a PFAS-impacted field. If you were there, it would smell like warm grass. You wouldn't hear anything out of the ordinary. There would be nothing to touch to tell you that something was amiss. So none of your senses would put you on notice that there was a problem. You know, so PFAS, it's invisible, it's odorless, it's silent, and therefore it's devastating because oftentimes landowners are blindsided when they find out that they've been impacted by PFAS, particularly if the land application was decades ago by a prior landowner. So naturally, knowledge of PFAS exposure and concerns about health effects, financial stability, an uncertain future, all of this can either amplify or amplify existing mental stress or elicit new mental stress if it wasn't there to begin with. Next, please. So to address these concerns, the PFAS Fund is working to establish a mental health services program that will include one-on-one counseling, in-person or online, peer support to help ease the emotional burden, wellness and related trainings, web-based resources, and potentially a hotline and training for agricultural service providers. We've contracted with an organization called Farm First to assess the landscape of existing resources and put together a plan for how to implement a mental health support program. I expect to receive their report this spring, and then based on that report, move towards implementation later this year. Also, the fund is cooperating with Humane Cooperative Extension as it plans for a Maine Land and Sea Farmer Wellness Forum, which will be held this April 28th in Hollowell. It will be a full-day event to bring together ag and fisheries service providers, community leaders, healthcare providers, legislators, and more to learn and collaborate on supporting the health and well-being and resilience of Maine's farm and fishing community. So the focus is not strictly on PFAS, but it's an evolving support network. Next, please. So looking ahead to 2025, Megan mentioned that the department is requesting some statutory changes. Among those, in LD 130, we are requesting some modest changes to the PFAS Fund statute. Presently, we can buy and sell land, but not lease it. So we want to rectify that. And also significantly, we want to direct the proceeds of sales or leases back into the PFAS Fund. And also, we want to be very clear that the department will treat medical billing records as confidential healthcare information. Like I said, the department is not going to be receiving any medical records, but I will be getting the bills. And I want people to be confident that the names of people who are getting blood testing or mental health support will be kept confidential. In the rulemaking realm, once we have authority to lease, we need to develop rules regarding the terms of both leases and sales. And we are going to be refining some of our existing rules, for instance, placing a cap on indirect for research, potentially refining the scoring criteria for research, and clarifying some elements of income replacement, among other things. But those are all really sort of housekeeping changes to both statute and rule. And next, please. So now I want to ask you here in this room, as well as via Zoom, if we can manage it, what are we getting right? What changes would you like to see to the fund? Do you have set suggestions for future research topics, etc.?
I think we might want to pass this around if folks have things to share or comments to add based on the presentation. Is there anyone that has would open up to the floor? All right, how about on Zoom? You'll want to put your hand up, your electric hand. Not seeing anything. All right. I hate to move so quickly, but I'm just wondering. Whoop, oh, here we go. I can't read that. Isaac Rothstein? I think, I may not be getting your name right, but why don't you go ahead and take yourself off mute and share your remarks with us here in the room.
Okay, thank you very much for the time. You have for my first time for occasion. I just had a question in regards to the research side of the program. I wanted to see if anybody's is currently conducting research on the disposal methodologies for PFAS remediation, specifically the Vital project. Anybody working on disposal of
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think your mic is working quite properly. We're having a hard time hearing you.
All right, stand by. Is that any better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Because I'm my computer here, and I wanted to say that you pronounced my name correctly the first time around, so thank you for that. I just wanted a quick question in regards to the research side of the program to see if any applicants or researchers are looking at disposal methodologies for PFAS contaminated crops, remediation projects specifically.
I am going to take that one. This is Maddie Bruno with the PFAS Fund. So I'm not going to speak yet about what kind of applications we've had yet because it's a confidential process and we have not gone through peer review yet. But I will say if you take a look at our research priorities in our most recent RFA, disposal is a question we have, especially disposal of PFAS contaminated on-farm products. And that also could potentially include things like phytoremediation or we have a lot of questions about plants that can uptake PFAS called hyperaccumulators. Well, the next question then is what are we going to do with those? It's great if hyperaccumulation works, but it does have to be destroyed still, or else we're just moving PFAS from one place to another. So to your point, that is definitely one of our research priorities, and it's, I believe, would fall under the fourth main research priority. So I encourage people who are interested in that to take a look at the RFA. It has a lot more information about exactly what kind of projects we would like to see, or but also leaves it open to, and I encourage people who may have ideas to apply to future ones too, because we're always looking for more information. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Maddie. Anybody else online with questions? Anyone in the room? Anyone on the team here have any comments or anything to add? Okay. And with that, I think we might be able to close our meeting for the morning. I just want to thank you all for coming, and just want to really congratulate the department on some pretty commendable work over the last few years. And what's been most impressive to me is the collaboration between agencies within state government. It's been fantastic to be a part of, and it's been inspiring to watch. And I think it's making quite a difference. So thank you all for being so collaborative. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and close our meeting, and thank you all for coming.